This episode of Comics vs. Show, we're going to compare AMC's The Walking Dead Season 5, Episode 12, Remember, to The Walking Dead comics. This video will be some of the biggest similarities and differences from the comics. Obviously, we can't list them all as that would just be way too much, but fair warning, these are spoilers from the comics, so if you haven't read up to issue 72, I would turn back now. If you're coming from The Walking Dead show, there won't be any spoilers from future episodes that you have to worry about. Number 1. In episode 12, we meet the leader of Alexandria's safe zone, Deanna. In the comics, Deanna is actually a man named Douglas. However, just like in the comics, Deanna is a congressman for Ohio. Fun tidbit, Douglas's wife's name is Regina in the comics, while Deanna's husband's name is Reg in the show. So it's kind of interesting what they did there, the Regina-Reg playoff. It really has me wondering what they want to do with Douglas's character, that they felt they could do it better with a female role. And let's face it, Deanna comes across as much less of a creepster than Douglas did. Number 2, there actually is an interview process to get into Alexandria, but there's no recording of it. As far as we know, you never know with Douglas. Number 3, Rick is given the job of constable in the comics just like in the show, but in the comics he's given the job right away when going through the interview process with Douglas. Also, Michonne is made his deputy, which is super cool that they kept that as well. Number 4, they're actually given 3 houses to live in the comics. In the show, they're only given 2 houses. However, just like the show, in the comics, they decide they're all better to stay in one house, just in case there's a trap. But this is suggested by Abraham, not Rick. Also, Deanna, which is Douglas in the comics, ends up coming over to the house and finding them all in it because he wants to tell Rick about trick-or-treating the next night, not because he's checking in to see how they're settled. Number 5. This is probably just a personal thing, but the inventory person is just as I imagined her. In the comics, they also have to surrender all their guns, but Michonne is allowed to keep her sword. Number 6. We meet Jesse a little differently in the comics than the show. In the show, Jesse shows up with the pantry items for Rick and then gives him a haircut. However, in the comics, Olivia, the weapons inventory person, shows up, gives him the items, and then the haircut. We don't see Jesse until a dinner party a little bit later. Also, Jesse only has one son, Ron, in the comics. In the television show, she has 2, Ron and Sam. Number 7, the lady walking a dog scene was also in the comics. This is such a fun scene because it really freaks Rick out. He feels like they're living in some fake world outside of their current terrible reality. Number 8, kind of minor, but I love that they showed solar panels in the show just like they have in the comics. And finally, number 9, Deanna, Douglas' son's name is Spencer in the comics, but Aiden in the show. But just like in the show and in the comics, Aiden acts like a complete douche nozzle. So that's our Comics vs. Show for The Walking Dead Episode 12. If there were changes or similarities you loved, you can write them below. Otherwise, come back next week for Comics vs. Show, The Walking Dead Episode 13.